Croeso and welcome to Abergavenny 2020, and it's so great to have you joining us. Normally, of course, we'd all be together in the town celebrating the hospitality industry, but well, what a year it's been. And that hospitality industry and the related industries, farming, and all of you people who enjoy the food and the atmosphere, what a year we've been through, and what a year many families have too. The hospitality sector is one of the sectors that has been most severely hit by coronavirus, has struggled, shut down, opened up, still struggling, I would say. And now there's talk of more local lockdowns or even more in the next few weeks, and a lot of concern. So obviously there's concern for people's health, for families' health, but also what we're talking about this evening in this debate is the health of this industry, which across the UK employs 900,000 people. One of the really important industries as well for many of our small or rural communities in Wales, where the food is produced and then sold, but also big business as well. And we're going to try and get a sense from our guests this evening about how they've survived the year so far and where they think we're going and who should be steering and what direction we should go. So we don't want much of me in this. It's about our guests tonight. And you can join in as well with your own questions, which we'll bring in. And the good news is, if there's bits that you want to listen back to, it'll be on YouTube very soon. So let's welcome our guests. I'd like to, first of all, just briefly introduce them all and then get them to talk about their business so we really get the sense of their world when we talk about it more generally. First of all, Kasim Ali, hello. You run Waterloo Tea, don't you? 3 cafes in Cardiff, but much more than that. Tell us about your business and how you see that relating to the hospitality sector across Wales and the UK.
Hey Sarah, thanks for the intro. We've got 6 now since the last time I saw you. So yeah, we've got 4 in Cardiff and 2 in Penarth. We started in 2008, right at the start of the boom for the specialty cafe sector, I'd say. So that was when we started having chefs in our kitchens, so serving good food, good environments. The launch of Waterloo Tea was really meant to be like an antidote to the espresso culture that I'd seen when I returned back to the UK from traveling. So where people didn't even have time to sit down and drink a cup of coffee or, have some food. So I was very much slow. The first cafe was around the corner from where we live. So very much local as well. The builders on the next street, furniture was bought from the people on the street after that, cakes baked around the corner. So that was the vibe. We've since grown to 6, really kept to that model of good food and good drink. We import, the best teas from Asia, and we resell those onto other like-minded businesses. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's us.
It's also the kind of business, isn't it, where you're offering much more than just the product.
Yeah, I mean, it's very much about the interior. So our takeaway sales pre-lockdown were less than 5% versus 70 to 80% of other cafes. And we encourage people to come and meet their friends. It's like a social hub, it coincided with quite possibly the death of the 2 pints at lunchtime. And also 2008 was a crazy time in terms of economics. So no longer could people go out and spend £50 on food and drink. For lunch, there was more around the £10 mark. So we have lots of meetings, lots of freelancers meeting there. Very much, although we've got one in the city centre, they're very much neighbourhood cafes.
And Simon Wright, you're in Llanarthony in Carmarthenshire, and you have many hats: broadcaster, writer, but also you've been running Wright's Food Emporium now for quite a few years. Tell us about that side of your business, first of all, in terms of, who comes to Wright's, what do you offer, what kind of place are you?
Well, we've been here 6 years, just over. It's a Georgian country and it's a beautiful building. It's been a place of hospitality since 1831. That's something I really love about it. Pretty much interrupted. In fact, the only interruption was really just before we took it over. We took it over in the end of 2013, and it had been closed for 10 years. For 3 years. Previously, it was owned by a chain. It hadn't worked, and it had been left to deteriorate, really. What we decided to do was we've run restaurants before, and we just wanted something that was as accessible as possible. So we wanted to continue to use as much local produce as we can. The majority of it's organic, but we wanted to be able to serve that in a way that you weren't seeing, the same sort of profile of clientele all the time. So yeah, it was pretty simple dishes, and pre-COVID, we would see maybe between 1,000 and 1,500 covers a week, which, was not what we'd expected, given that, we're in a village of 200 people here. I like to pretend that we're in the middle of nowhere. That's not really true. We're only we're sort of quarter of an hour from the A48 dual carriageway. But yeah, that's what we've been about, really, trying to make that model work. And we also have sort of shop sales as well. And that actually for us was a considerable part of the business, about 20 to 25%.
And why did you aim to buy so many things locally, so much of your produce locally? Was that customers wanting that, or you wanting that? And if so, why?
It was definitely us wanting that. I mean, I've got to be honest. I mean, we probably we tend to think first about what it is we want to do. I think a lot of people in this industry do the same. One of the biggest rewards that you get from it is the creativity. So you set out to do what you really like, and of course you want to work with the freshest, best ingredients, and you also want them to represent your local area, because why wouldn't you do that? And so yeah, that was why it was key to what we're doing. Obviously that comes with consequences, but we'll probably talk about those.
And Rachel Roddy, you live in Italy now. You moved to Rome in, I think, 2005. You very much are still in our lives, because you write for The Guardian and you have your own blog as well. Italy, we think obviously the kind of cliches, but does Italy hold hospitality, businesses like Kasim and Simon's, in perhaps a different regard than we do in the UK?
I think actually it was something Simon just said about like a place of hospitality. I live in Rome, and I live in a very particular part of Rome called Testaccio. And so it is like a sort of village within the city. And I only mention that because I'm very aware of sort of speaking for everybody. I speak very much for this particular part of Rome, which is relatively modern actually, but in this ancient city. And I say that it's a sort of, the whole quarter is a place of hospitality, and that isn't to idealise it at all. I mean, far from it. But, it's very defined here what hospitality is. I mean, there are 21 cafes, there are, 12 trattorias, there are, 8 pizza by the slice. It's a very defined sort of way of living and eating and drinking out, and it has been so for a long time. And I'd say that, especially in the terms of trattorias, I've always thought that sort of Roman eating is much closer to a pub than a restaurant. In fact, they were born out of taverns. So I've always felt that, that role that trattorias play is very much like the English pub. So I think that defining the nature of hospitality has maybe made the sort of experience of COVID different. Again, that isn't to idealise it. I mean, we're sort of suspended here still. And I think that we'll talk later about actually some quite positive things at the moment, but none of those old problems have gone away. Actually, I would imagine when they come waving back, but I think it's defined. I mean, I'm sitting here next to, I can sort of hear the bar underneath me, like it click back into, it has a very defined place, and people have a very defined relationship with how they eat and drink, I think.
When we talk about the hospitality sector in the UK, it's really wide, from massive chains through to smaller places like Simon and Kasim's, but also smaller places that, quite frankly, heat up something that was made in a factory. Do you have that breadth of difference in the industry in Italy? Because in a way that makes it harder to represent, or harder for governments to help.
I think we do. I mean, I think that there is a huge sort of, and in fact, that's part of the problem, because I think that maybe because the sort of trattoria, the bar, the pizza by the slice, the pizzeria, because those sort of classic Italian institutions are so defined, it makes other things more difficult. And also there's so much sort of, so much romanticism about Italian food. There's huge amounts of industrial food. There's huge amounts of food being made in factories. There's huge amounts of food coming from all over the world. But I think it's just a different constellation of stars. But I would imagine all the elements are the same. That isn't to undermine those very fixed institutions, but it's a different constellation of the same things, I think.
Let's now have a sort of move back and try and remember where the industry was before COVID hit. Simon, I remember reading something months ago, I think it was could have been this time last year, saying that the top 100 restaurants in London were losing millions of pounds. Those names that we presume are raking it in just weren't. Across the industry, how was it before COVID?
Oh yeah, that is such a significant point. The industry was in a crisis of profitability before COVID. It's been a creeping one, I suppose, over the last decade or even 2 decades. And so when COVID hit, one of the reasons that the problems are so acute now is that nobody was sitting on a pile of cash. It's been difficult for a very long time. And, those structural problems will remain when we come out of COVID in whatever form. And, we need to talk about them now if we value the idea of restaurants at whatever level.
Do you think governments and authorities or the public even recognise that? Or did they presume that because, a main course was £35, £40 in some places, and I'm sure a lot more, that the guys were running it were rolling in it?
Oh, they do assume that. They don't all assume that, but yeah, there is an assumption. And it's not like you want to keep reminding the customer that that's not the case. Though I think there is an argument for more transparency of pricing in the industry, because in order to kind of puncture that a little bit. But yeah, look, we were turning over just over £1 million net of VAT, and I'd never anticipated that we would turn over that kind of money where we are. But, I can unhappily tell you that, we only made profit last year was the first time we'd made profit for 3 years. Now, that may be because we're poor business people, but been in it a long time. So, we know a fair bit about it. I think it was last year on a Sunday, we were particularly busy. It was probably August, people queuing out the door. And a friend of mine came in and he was kind of like, he was doing this, like I must be making loads of money. And I said, you don't understand. He said, come on. He said, not many people got a car like that. I said, what do you mean? He said, your new car outside. I said, what about my new car outside? He said, there's not many of those about. And he was referring to an Aston Martin that was parked in the car park that happened to have an SW number plate. And I had to point out to him that, I did have a new car and it's a Mazda 3 and, I'm pleased to have it. But there is a problem of perception. And I think there's something else. There's a problem of perception and not a real understanding of what it costs to be good or to offer really good food based on great ingredients. Then there's a huge difference in price, obviously, in buying those things. We should be in a position, I feel, if the industry was in some kind of equilibrium, we'd be able to buy really good produce locally. We'd also be able to pay the staff more and ourselves, because, it's pretty balanced across that, and it certainly is in our business. Nobody's earning very much. Then be able to price it accordingly. But at the moment, it doesn't work like that.
Why can't you do that?
Well, I don't think, 2 reasons for me. One is that I don't want to be inaccessible to people who are not earning very much. So it's never been an ambition to serve people that only come in helicopters. So this is the thing I can't quite understand about Noma and places like that. I admire the creativity and the enterprise, but you're serving the same small section of society all the time, largely. I don't want to do that. And secondly, would the market take? What will the market take? It's a bit strange in food. People go and buy a very ordinary car and they'll pay X for it. And people go and buy some kind of swish car. I don't know much about cars. I don't know why I'm using this analogy, but let's say a swish car, and they'll pay 5 times that price. with food, it's not necessarily the case. You know, you can do that, or you certainly probably can't do it, and you certainly can't do it and meet a wide audience. Which, to me, if I can't meet a wide audience, there's no point in doing it, really.
Kasim, do you want to meet a wide audience, or is the secret to have a narrow niche as a business?
I definitely like to reinforce Simon's views in some way. The wide audience thing and the issue about pricing is really pertinent. Our market, the specialty cafe sector, is very dominated, or the cafe sector, very dominated by large, multinationals nowadays, who I view as cartels. They effectively set the price. So if they are charging £2.80 for a cup of coffee, and, if we want to price everything up, considering the time that people spend in our cafes, which we love, a price of, a cup of coffee should be around £5. So are we brave enough to really put that on the menu as that being a price? Or, do we just go with the flow and make losses, or just about make a profit? So, but I think the neighborhood aspect of the wider reach is really important. So, whereas people used to go to pubs and churches before, that's less so now. So I do view as, we'll have professionals, we'll have pensioners, we'll have young mums with kids. So we really serve the community well. And we can't really make it out of reach for anybody. That's not saying a £5 cup of coffee should be out of reach, but that's down to the larger macroeconomic failings, I would suggest.
And things like, for instance, the wages that people in the industry are paid. Do you think that in a way works against it? The fact that so many are on minimum wage in our society working in your sector?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's just the failure of our economic system, for sure. We've recently moved after COVID to national living wage. But, when the crisis hits, I could see on our staff's faces that actually they're working hand to mouth. They've got no savings. The look of fear of where's our next pay packet coming from, as an employer, is devastating. And it makes you question why we're doing this. If we can't look after the people who we're employing, then maybe we should step aside. But I think to make those changes, to make our staff better paid, now is the time that we need to make our voices heard. As Simon mentioned, the government and the civil servants, I'm not having a personal attack on them, but I often felt, I've never really engaged with them, thankfully, but I have since post-COVID, but I often felt that everything they knew about our industry was a double-sided PDF, so I think every sector in the last few months has been shouting and saying, actually, this is what it's like on the front line, and trying to improve consultations between sector and government is a really crucial time for that. And I think, like all of us, if we don't shout now, then this opportunity will pass us by.
Yeah, and that point of sectors and whether they should get help from government and what the sector should do back in return, we'll come back to later. And it's great to welcome Stephen Terry from the Hardwick Restaurant. Clearly busy at work, Stephen. He's so busy at work, he can't quite hear us yet. We'll come back to him in a moment. Rachel, one of the things that's interesting or frustrating, I'm sure, for people in the industry is that in the UK, people can walk into jobs in hospitality without the formal training that they might be expected to have in other countries. And then at the same time, the wages are on the low end, like an awful lot of them on the minimum wage. Is that same kind of thing happening in Italy, in France, and other countries in Europe?
I think the situation's different here on one level, in the sense that, especially in sort of family-run trattorias, which really still do define Italian eating, they're staffed by people who, these are lifetime jobs. These are sort of professional waiters who, in 7 or 8 local trattoria I know well, I would say that most of the waiters have worked there 20, 30, 40 years. I mean, these are jobs for life. But something I just wanted to go back to about, I think Simon, both Simon and Kasim were saying about sort of, a wide audience and the cost of, the cost of things. I mean, again, in Italy, very defined. I think ever since they got the euro, 2001, cups of an espresso is 90 centesimi, so that's 80p. That's a pizza margherita is €6. A plate of carbonara is 9. I mean, these are what people expect to pay, but of course, that isn't what food costs anymore. That isn't what a cup of coffee costs anymore in Italy. And there are a lot of people. I would say post-COVID in Italy, there was certainly a big crash of any sort of big. There was quite a few big name restaurants opened. One opened just near me, massive sort of almost like a sort of service station restaurant of different zones. That closed. But there were certainly sort of young enterprising, particularly young cafes, young trattorias, trying to change the sort of this point of really being stuck around ingredients about, a cup of coffee having to cost 80 cents. But it's hard. I mean, it's sort of impossible because that's what people expect to pay. And it's sort of seen as sort of against sort of human rights to charge more for a cup of coffee. But of course, what do you do when a cup of coffee doesn't cost 80 cents? It's, and this is where the Italian government has to step in, but they're not because it's a real catch-22, I think.
And what about
here.
wages for people serving that coffee?
I mean, I think wages here are much lower. I mean, costs generally are lower in Italy, but it's and there's a lot of people working near. A lot of people work under the table, or half their wages are sort of pay packet, the other half under the table. It's tricky. I mean, there's loads of people who are running great businesses here, but it's very difficult. And I think again, a lot of these huge sort of insidious problems that were really reaching boiling point before COVID. I really felt sort of tension, and then we shut down so clearly here. One thing we've had is clarity with COVID, like Italy shut down. On the 10th of March, everyone stayed at home. And when you went out, you put a mask on. We heard the city locked down. So I think that clarity has been the one shining light, because at least we've sort of known where we stood, and still do to a certain extent. Yeah. Sorry, if that makes any sense. But we've had clarity in that sense, real clarity from the government, who fail in many other ways.
Well, joining us from the little office just on the side of the kitchen at the Hardwick is Stephen Terry. Hello, Stephen.
Hi, how you doing?
Great, thank you. So when you started training with Pierre White and then moved years...
Is that what it was? That was training, was it?
Yeah, that was training. And
right, okay. I needed a bit of clarity on that 35 years later.
You're just developing various businesses that you've had since. Did you think that you get to a state before COVID, the state we were before, that so many good restaurants were finding it hard to make money?
No, not when I was not back in the day when I was training, not at all. I mean, we had some tough times in the 80s when the whole financial crash, when that happened, was it 87 or something. But I didn't really feel it, I mean, when you're young and that, all you were focused on was learning and working. And, in those restaurants, we were always quite busy anyway. We were never doing massive numbers. So that never really affected us huge. And it certainly didn't affect me personally, because I was just getting a weekly wage. I wasn't a business owner struggling to make ends meet. Not that I got the impression anyone I was working for at the time that they were struggling. But no, when you look back, I mean, everything's changed so much. I mean, it's just the world. The world is just a changed place in such a short space of time. In 30 odd years. It's incredible. I mean, I was thinking, about this today, about this discussion today, and about how I was going to contribute. And for me, as the gentleman there, Kasim, when you as I joined, because I had a few techie issues because I'm a dumb chef. It's about, there aren't many industries where, and it's more so in the kitchen as opposed to front of house, where you're expected to work long hours, long hours. I mean, at the moment it's super tough, because we are, busier than normal in terms of, relatively speaking, throughout the year. Because obviously, we've reopened, everyone wants to go out. So we've had an amazing August, as everyone has, and September has been good up until now. It's a bit quieter next week. We are working like 16, 17-hour days. It's no joking. I'm not exaggerating on my kids' lives. We come in at 8 o'clock and we do not leave before midnight, and that was with no break. you know, and I'm the owner. I'm not, no, I'm, you know, I'm in this with them. And we do that for 4.5 days. And today's the half day. We'll be out by 8 tonight, doing. You know, we came in at 8. That's a 12-hour day today, doing. You know, when we're not earning any more, relatively speaking, for the hours, we earn less per hour. You know, people wouldn't work these hours for what we earn per hour. They wouldn't do it normally, you know, and you look at it, and at the moment, you know, it's good with this whole 5% VAT thing. That's a massive, massive boost to us, massive, you know, and it needs to be, you know, for me, for restaurants to come in line with other work, you know, with other practices and vocations and opportunities and options for young people coming to, who've got to work for a living, as most people do. And it's a great, you know, I can't recommend it anymore, you know, that it's someone who's created and loves food. I mean, I don't regret a thing I've done, you know. It's been hard and it still is hard, you know. I was working as hard now as I ever have done in my life, and I'm 53, you know. I'm working as hard as when I was 23 at Harvey's, you know. It's just like, you know, we're tired. If I sat here for long enough, I would just fall asleep in front of you, you know. And I'm not feeling sorry for myself, don't worry. I'm not getting the little violin out or anything, but, you know, it is what it is, you know. But to encourage, you know, into this hospitality, this wonderful industry that we're all part of and we love dearly, and it's multicultural, and it's, you know, like, you know, Rachel in Italy, I mean, it's like, I love going to Italy. It's just like, I'm so jealous of you being there. It's like, you know, it's like just enveloping that and just encouraging people that, you know, to be able to cook and to be part of hospitality, you should never ever be out of work. But the work has to be of value, you know, and it's like, we need to be able to pay our workers, you know, in proportion to the hours that they do. We need to be able to afford to do that. It was interesting what Rachel was saying. It's changing a cultural mentality of what a coffee costs, or, you know, and people, and sometimes it's always hard to explain to people that the chain pub down the road selling its ham, egg and chips for, I know, let's just say, for example, £14 is actually making a much better profit on that than we are selling our home cooked ham with our triple cooked chips and our everything done in the house for £2 more. Well, they think I'm taking the mickey because it's £2 more, but I'm making 50% less profit. You know, do you know what I mean? It's like, we make that choice. I make that choice to be where I am in the market, and where we are in the market, I think it's quite tough because we're not in that quite saturated sort of pubby chainy sort of restaurant part of the market, and we're not in that high end where you can not get away with, but you can justify a much higher price. We're in that middle market, which again is quite a vibrant market, but you're competing with both either side of you, you know. So, and you know, it's difficult, but I think the most important thing is trying to make it better for restaurateurs in hospitality to be able to employ people with confidence and knowing that you can pay them, you know, for the value of work that they do for you and the hours they do. A lot of these my chefs in here, you know, they double shift, they're 9 shifts. 9 shifts, it's like, it's a lot, hell of a lot. They enjoy it, don't get me wrong.
But the sort of most immediate thing is to survive, isn't it?
Absolutely. And to do that.
Closed down for months, and now there could be more restrictions on the way.
Yeah.
It's a big challenge. I mean, Simon, did you find yourself look at the business during lockdown and think, right, I'm going to come out the other side doing things differently? Because you have changed, haven't you?
Yeah, we did. And I mean, it's kind of good and bad. I mean, one thing that was kind of, I mean, others may agree with this, I don't know. But the bigger that we got, and we didn't set out to get bigger necessarily, it just sort of happened. The bigger that we got, the harder it got to make it profitable. I felt like we were feeding the monster to some degree. It was wonderful because we got to the point where we were employing, I think, 14, 15 full-timers, you know, in a rural area, which has got to be a good thing. They were great staff. But it introduced a whole new set of costs. And I was kind of aware at the time that we would probably find it easier to turn a profit if we were smaller. That's partly because our fixed costs aren't as high as some other people's here. You know, it's more difficult if you've got a huge rent to pay, for instance. And so our model at the moment is completely different. I mean, we're, you know, from being open 6 days a week and a lot of hours, we're open Thursday through till Sunday. We're only doing supper on Saturday, and the menu is 2 or 3 courses and a choice of 2 at each course. Now, I mean, the reason that we did that was partly I was thinking about, you know, that thing that we often think about in the UK is we used to think this a lot, how do they manage to do it in Europe where it's cheaper? And I was thinking back to when I was a kid and my parents would drive down through France, and they didn't have very much money, but we'd pull into the Les Routiers places, which were, you know, often a mix of truckers and locals, and there'd be no choice or a choice of two. And so we decided to try and move to that model to see what that meant for the economics. Now, the reality of it is it makes the economics an awful lot better. And it might be something that places start to think about when we come out the other side of this. Steve mentioned VAT, and it really does tie in with Rachel's point. I hadn't really thought about it that way. You know, the problem with VAT has been for us is that it's crept up to 20%, and the public don't see it. It's not visible to them. So they're not looking at a menu and thinking, oh, 20% of that is going straight to the treasury. And of course, there's no VAT on the inputs in terms of food. It's straight 20% gone, you know. And so that's caused us a huge problem over the years. And then I think the wider problem that we have to address, and you know, this is one of the good things about this, it's bringing all the questions into relief, is the cost of food generally and the whole relationship between food, farming, and the environment. I mean, why is it that properly produced food costs so much to buy relative to food that's produced with a set of in such a way that it has huge environmental costs, is detrimental to health, etc., etc. So we won't resolve the whole problem until we've resolved some of those questions. But at least it's kind of making those questions more apparent than they weren't before.
And of course, your model now, your new model might be better for your bank balance, but that means, you know, 50%, if not more, cut in the workers that you're employing, and you'll be buying in fewer salads, etc., from people that you're buying from locally, won't you? I mean,
yeah, definitely. And that's the point we're trying to make to government all the time at the moment, is that, you know, if you lose, we are the foundational economy. You know, we're all spending, our money goes back into the local area. So, you know, if you've lost 50% of the businesses by this time next year, which is entirely possible in Wales, look at the knock-on effect on the local economy. But I would say one thing about the employment is that, you know, we're feeding less people because we have less covers, etc., etc. So, you know, maybe it's the case that we need more local restaurants. Maybe, you know, doing simpler things. I mean, one of the things here is that we've often been asked, you know, do you want to do another one? We couldn't do another one because it wouldn't be the same, really. I mean, you get tempted, but, you know, it's a personal business with us. But what has happened is people have worked here and they've gone and opened their own. So, you know, maybe we need to think about what that pattern will be like going forward. And how do we make it possible for people to have sustainable small restaurants in country areas and in towns and suburbs, where they can serve the local community really well with great food, neighborhood restaurants effectively, and make a reasonable living. So everything comes a bit proportionate again.
Yeah.
But, you know, at the same time, there'll be people watching this saying, well, okay, that's fine, but I like going to a chain. You know, a lot of people go to chains, and perhaps that's part of your problem as people in this sector, is that you're such a wide group, but you're seen as one industry. And actually the chains and yourselves have different issues and different problems.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. And, you know, it's a bit of a plug for the WIRC, the Welsh Independent Restaurant Collective, that we formed in June of this year. And it's got 300 supporting businesses across Wales. We formed that because we didn't have a voice with government. It's actually unbelievable that how hard it is to make government understand the difference between us and McDonald's. It really is, especially a Labour government that talks endlessly about the foundational economy. They don't get it, frankly, we've really struggled to get that message through.
Kasim, you're also part of that group, aren't you? The thing is, for a lot of people, a lot of families, it is the same thing whether you get your meal from McDonald's or whether you go to an independent place, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, my beef, and I think everybody agrees, isn't with chains per se. You know, they all started off as one-off shops on the whole, and you know, they may have got funding in different ways, but my issue is that they don't really add to the local economy, and that has knock-on effects. And I think
what you mean by that. Why don't they?
so. So as Simon was saying, we're using, you know, our bread is baked by Alex Gooch. Our cakes are baked locally. Our veg is bought from a local shop. So all our money goes back into the local economy. If you're offshoring in Luxembourg, if you're moving your coffee through the chain, you know, your chain of companies, then in the same way as the government recently said, you know, let's go abroad, even to countries which have lower infection rates than us, because essentially they wanted to get the message across: keep your money in the UK, don't spend it abroad, because they realized they were broke. Now the same rationale can be applied in spending your money in chains. That profit is just taken out of our system. So it's not an argument against chains per se. It's actually a call for a better local taxation system, and that would really benefit, you know, it would be more money in the pockets of our local residents and our local customers. So it's, you know, I've got nothing against a Big Mac. You know.
So before we move on to what needs to happen, Stephen, was shut down time a time for you to reshape your business?
Oh yeah, for sure, yeah. Yeah, well, you know, we had a couple of issues that we didn't really foresee happening, but I won't go into the detail. But it's just someone was doing something they shouldn't have been doing, so it caused us a lot of problems. But I mean, because of that, and because of the whole lockdown, it presented us with an opportunity to. I mean, I've always been, you know, hands on creatively cooking all day, and yeah, you know, I have a look at things. I don't sort of walk in here and just look at the stove and then walk home, you know, go back home. But I've always had someone looking after the nitty gritty stuff, the stuff that kind of bores me, if I'm honest. But it is important. You know, I know I make a profit in terms of the food, but it's everything else, isn't it? And managing that and doing all that stuff. Well. So yeah, I've got stuck into that. So that's been good, and I've got a new accounts team and a new accountant, and it's been really good. And it's like every day people say, I talk to people in lockdown, they're like, "Oh, it was amazing. We went and did this, went and did that." It's like learning Russian for me. I mean, it was like I was learning stuff I just hadn't learned before. So every day was a bloody school day for me, if I'm honest. But it was good, really good, and it's really benefited us.
Has the menu changed? Has the environment there changed? Have you done a reshape like Simon was talking about?
Yeah, I mean, look, because obviously there was a lot of talk before when we reopened. Obviously, Wales opened a month after the UK, England, in terms of inside dining. So, and we didn't know what to expect. I mean, it has been really good, and we have been really busy. But there are a couple of positions that we made redundant. Which we regret having to do, but I think we feel we did the right thing, because I said that the thing is you've got to be cautious and make some changes, tighten things up a bit, because I believe that the opportunities will be there to re-employ people or for those positions to become available again. But I think to go in cautiously, just in case, and that's what we did. Like I say, it's been tough. And then with the menu, yes, the menu. Remember, we were doing the small plates, so we redeveloped the bar and did all the small. Obviously, you can't do that because it's social distancing, and as much as people liked it, really, it was a little bit of an issue because we were trying to do two things, and people said, "Oh, I didn't know you did that." So, to be honest, we've knocked that on the head, but we've still got a lovely bar, which is just as well. So the menu is a little bit smaller. There's a little bit less change on the main courses. I was supposed to keep the starters down to about. It was supposed to be like 6, 6, and 6. I mean, last night we had 13 starters on and 5 main courses. So I'm getting a hard time off the missus as usual. But some of it's easy. Some of but it's good. People like what we do. It has made a difference to our covers, obviously with social distancing. So we were a 100 cover restaurant before, so we're down to about 60. So, but it still works for us. I mean, today lunch we did 90. So that's good. I mean, we go from 12 till 3:30. We sent the last main course just before you went live, and I was trying to get my tech sorted out. But it's been good.
And if there were further lockdowns, either a national one or local ones, do you think you'd be able to get through that? How would you get through that?
Well, it depends on the restrictions, because we've already had a conversation saying, would we be able to do takeaway? And I'm like, well, look, if it's one of those sort of like, you know, sort of like they call it a circuit breaker lockdown, where, you know, it is intended seriously to just to bring the numbers down, then I don't think anything like takeaway is going to be, you know, is going to be allowed. You know, it's going to be like stay at home guys, you know, just everyone just need to, you know, to make a break in this. If that's the case, we do what we do. Yes, I absolutely very confident that we'll survive it. You know, what with the help that we've had from the government, which, you know, I cannot oh, sorry, someone just put a note underneath my door. Liverpool just beating Chelsea 2-0, if anyone wants to know. My Sujan's a massive Chelsea fan, and I'd like to see Liverpool beat them. So it's going very well for me. Yes. The old Liverpool too. So yeah, you know, I think, you know, we'd survive. It's going to be, you know, I don't think the country would anything longer than 2 weeks. I think it's just going to be catastrophic, to be honest with you. We've had a taste of it already, a long taste of it. You know, you know, most of us have gotten through that. I mean, I know personally I'm in a better position. I won't have to be trying to learn Russian again because everything's sorted out now, so I can maybe get some sleep in 2 weeks. But you know, there's always stuff to do. But and again, it will create another hopefully surge in interest of people going out again. You know, having to be restricted to staying at home. So, you know, again, I don't think we'll suffer too much from it. And then if it needs to be done, hey, listen, it's got to be done. But we're all hoping it's the last resort. Where we are at the moment, you know, we're very fortunate. It's very rural. It must be the same for you, Simon. I mean, you know, it's just quite fortunate that there's, you know, it's not a lot of crowding. I mean, everyone seems to be going to Cornwall and everything. And, you know, how there's not a massive spike down there, I do not know. But no, so far so good, touch wood.
So, Kasim, you know, if we put aside whether there might be more lockdowns on the horizon, furlough ends at the end of October, and we're going to have then a lot of businesses thinking about their way forward. You know, you are a sector that's really fragile anyway. You're the sector that's been most hit by shutdown. So what needs to happen for the future, and who needs to be steering that?
Yeah, I think that we can probably frame this into two different sections. So the COVID era and the post-COVID. COVID era, I think we've had a taste of what's to come. Realistically, I think August feels like it was a carnival, you know, and so that's probably as good as it gets, even if it gets that good in terms of business in hospitality. And I think, you know, until Easter, probably summer, this will be the state of play. So we need to embrace that, and we'll need government support. Realistically, there'll be some winners and some losers, but hospitality sit down, it's just realistically that's utter devastation, you know. So I think we need to be ready for that, and we need to use this time wisely to campaign to shape the future. Now, post-COVID, where do we see our industry? Definitely less influence of chains, I would say. More emphasis on local and educating the people that don't know, whether they be the public or the politicians, as to the importance of that. Change won't be given to us. We need to make the noise ourselves, and we need to be brave. We need to, you know, take action. What form that comes in, I think we're all deciphering ourselves, but it's not going to come if we sit meekly on the side. And because we know the forces to get us back to how things used to be are strong. So as independent businesses with a view of a better future, now's the time to make change. And actually, if I can just build on that I think change often comes more as a reaction rather than as a proactive step. So it's easy to react to disaster, but it's more difficult to act to prevent climate change, for example. And in a sense, if there are more lockdowns, that's the time when we need to say, look, this is what's happening. We need to get these changes in place, and they may well be enacted as temporary measures, but we can build on those.
But Simon, you know, if you think the government should give you more support, why should they support independence when most people go to chains?
Well, I mean, you know, it depends what their objectives are, doesn't it? I mean, clearly, and you know, they have objectives set out. They have objectives set out in terms of climate change, sustainability, the foundational economy. And, you know, surely we want to see more of our money stay within Wales and support the Welsh agriculture, Welsh agriculture and Welsh producers generally. We talk about these things quite a lot, and yet we have the embarrassing situation that we only retain 8% of the agricultural produce that comes out of Wales. Nobody wants that to be the situation, and we can change it. So, you know, the thing is, instead of paying lip service to it, we have to look at those structural changes, and it's all possible. What we've learned during, you know, what we've learned on a personal level, and Kasim and I have both been involved in discussions with government, endless discussions with government, is how, you know, even though Welsh Government, the point of it surely is to be nimble and able to change things fast, what a lumbering beast it actually is and how unambitious it is. And so, you know, I think what we're saying is, look, you know, there are answers out there. There are things we can do. I mean, let's take the financial support for a start. I mean, it was a very, very blunt instrument. You know, and okay, we wanted to react quickly, but you know, in terms of the economic support, a lot of that has gone to chains. Do we really need to support them? You know, have you looked at their balance sheets? Because, you know, maybe you should do that first before you start giving them extra money. And certainly in terms of Eat Out to help out, a lot of that, I mean, we would have been busy in August anyway, just by reopening. I don't think we had any extra benefit. I'm not particularly worried about us, but I think that's true of quite a lot of independent businesses. And that would have been a lot more welcome later in the year. And it would also been welcome if that had been, you know, targeted where it's really needed and where the money, look, for every, I don't know the figures. In fact, the figures don't exist because I've talked to you about this, Sarah, before. But I mean, I don't know what the real figures are for what independent businesses spend within the local economy. We can only tell you anecdotally, but, you know, of the £400,000 that we spent pre-COVID every year on produce and the service of small businesses, probably 80 to 90% of that was spent within a 25-mile radius, you know, certainly spent within Wales. That's not going to be true of Costa, etc.
And that's particularly pertinent to our rural economies, isn't it? And so, you know, if you're not, you know, it's the knock-on effect, isn't it? And that's your challenge, is to persuade politicians that your knock-on is important in that way. Rachel, in Italy, is this kind of debate going on about government support and then what restaurants should do in return, if you like?
Yeah, I mean, hugely. I mean, I think the sort of furlough system here, the Cassa di Integrazione, was disastrous. So, I mean, it was quite different. I think a lot, I can't remember the figures for how many sort of restaurants are the owners, like, own the buildings. And there was certainly some rent subsidy planning. I mean, where we are in Testaccio, there's several large sort of landlords. And I know that two of them actually were sort of very considerate with sort of rent relief for those people that were sort of subletting. But the furlough system was a disaster. I think the thing I see in Italy is, you know, here, for example, we've got this extraordinary sort of, they're very about preserving sort of local products, which we know in England, the protection of sort of parmesan and pancetta and wine and beer and all the pasta. You know, but actually there seems to be this great sort of divide between the fact that they've got these structures to protect products, and yet they don't sort of protect them from the biggest sort of danger, which is big industry. And I think I just, as a writer, I sort of feel so useless, but I think it's going back to what everyone's saying. We all, the government and people, we all need to sort of return to the baseline, which is, where do we want to spend our money? Sort of, who do we want to give our money to? And I think in Italy now they have a real problem because they're stuck in the past, in the sense that people still think that olive oil is coming, you know, from 20 miles down the road. Like, it isn't. It's coming from Turkey. You know, it's coming from sort of, you know, it's coming from sort of mixed sources. And not there's anything wrong with, you know, and so I think that people sort of need to know where things are sort of coming from, and sort of that feels like an even bigger mess, I think, in Italy than in the UK. The sort of clarity of knowledge and knowing where things are coming from, the big difficulty.
Stephen, do you think the government should be the people who try and take this industry forward in some way or another? Should they be protecting, giving money or help, or is it up to you guys to do it? Would you want government help?
I think it's up to us guys. Like as Kasim said, and Simon mentioned earlier, with the Welsh Independent Restaurant Collective, which is over 300 members yet, which reminds me I need to pay my subscription. But I'm still an honorary member at the moment. But I think the whole reason of that being created was to have a voice for independent restaurateurs, which I can't think of anything more important, if I'm honest with me. We all seem to be talking about the same thing here about the chains, etc., etc. And it's like sometimes they look at their balance sheet and are they putting back into local economy? No, they're not. Of course they're not. But I mean, we are, because we're passionate and we care. That's, I care so much about my suppliers. They're all local suppliers. You've been one of our suppliers, Sarah, with your wonderful lamb. It's Simon's supplier of ours with the wine. We all look after each other. Because it's we are a small economy, but and it'd be nice to sort of be more self-sustaining. But with regards to the government, they're not the enemy. They just need our experience. We've got such a massive wealth of experience between us all, and we can help them to help us. It's like, and they shouldn't be so shy about that happening. And yeah, of course, financially, there's always help to be, with the VAT and anything that can be done to help us out, and other industries as well. I'm sure we're not on our own here, but absolutely, I think like for the WIRC for sure it's important that continues, and Kasim mentioned just in a message there that it's about without standing on our orange box, because sometimes it's like, does anyone really care? Do they want to know? Some people do, some people don't. But if we've made people more aware that we are independent and we are supporting the local economy and we're passionate about that, there should be something that, okay, maybe it could be a sticker in the window or something, because that's something that we would have, and those chains would never have something like that because they don't. I mean, okay, McDonald's will harp on about all their beefs from the UK. Yeah, of course it is, if they wouldn't say it if it wasn't. But the UK is a big place, for McDonald's on, in Abergavenny. It's not like it's within a 50-mile radius or anything, And I know that would be impossible for them to do, but for us, we make that happen. So I think it's not about being rewarded for that. It's about making people understand it and it being recognised, And I think that might make people's choice a little bit more informed, and that's what we're trying to do, is give them a more informed choice.
And from a government point of view, though, if they've got the car industry, aerospace, and everybody else knocking at their door, with very big numbers in terms of their turnover and employees, how can you guys make your voice heard? Because you've got passion and people that care, is what you said.
Because we are the independent.
Just with that.
Yeah, but in relatively though, I mean, okay, we're not a massive industry, but we are in Wales, and then if you put all the independent restaurants together in England, it's it carries a bit of weight in that sector. In hospitality, as independents, it's a big deal. If we all shut down overnight, that would make a big difference. It may make a big difference to the economy, to employment. Let's not forget, all these people, anyone in government, they're just like, the normal people, they like to go out to eat as well, so it's not like they don't like to go and eat in nice places or independents. Everyone likes their local restaurant around the corner. Well, we are those restaurants. That's who we are, and we need to be supported. We're not looking to be bailed out, and we're not feeling sorry for ourselves. We're hard-working, passionate people, but cutting a little bit of slack here and there would be appreciated, and let's sit around the table and how can we make things easier? How can we make for everybody, easier for the consumer to come in and to sort of part with their hard, well-earned cash, just as it is for everybody. It's like you say, yeah, we're supporting the local. To some people, it makes no difference there whether that money's going into the local economy or overseas, whatever. But to a lot of people, it does, and it's nice to know where that money's going.
So, Simon, is that the challenge, do you think, for you as an industry to remind us, the customers or the potential customers, that the money is staying locally? Have something like a sticker, like Stephen was suggesting. Have a criteria, if you like. So, because to a certain extent, whose fault is it if we don't realise you're not buying locally and that our pounds aren't staying in your village, your community?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that sort of goes to what I said earlier in terms of the wider food economy. Those lessons need learning, and we need to make that more transparent, and education is clearly important in that. I really actually think that we can only really change and prosper and see more local restaurants using, being hubs of their community, if we have an overarching change in food and farming. It's not really possible, in my view, to do it on our own. So though we can make small areas of progress, as far as just, it's really hard to get the attention of government. We've carried out surveys of our members last weekend, and we did it back in June. We've got no doubt that at least 10,000 jobs have been lost in the independent sector already, which, and probably maybe double that, certainly by Christmas. That's 1.2% of the entire Welsh workforce. Airbus, 1,500 jobs, really important. It's 10 times that, but we can't get any purchase with government. So, the whole thing is difficult in terms of public knowledge and politics, etc., etc. But certainly I think in terms of us progressing and what I'd like optimistically to see going forward, we need, when Wales, we have to take a whole different attitude to food and farming. We can be the leader in Wales. I've felt that for years, and it's the one thing that really exasperates me, that we're not doing it.
Are you sure? Can I just say one thing? Sorry. I was conscious because I was really careless before with something I said. I think another thing yesterday I was in this sort of international shop, Castroni in Rome, getting my sort of English products, getting my golden syrup and my baking powder. And the other thing I want to say was, I do think, of course, it's great, we are all local, but also, for example, Simon, what you do with sort of Italian wines, also sort of the same with import and export, which now more importantly than ever, mentioning sort of Italian and Turkish olive oil. I want all of it. I just want all of it to be thoughtful. I want all of it to be, and I think even more with, because I love the idea that Italian wine goes all over the world, and I love my local restaurant that have, cheddar toasted sandwiches on the menu. Like, I want that, but that has to be thoughtful too. And now more than ever. So isn't it? It just all comes down to, as my old neighbour used to say, I'm not spending my money with him, Rachel. He's a bad un. And she was talking about a market stall, but actually it's like a lesson for life. I'm not giving him any money. And I just think if we could all be given that message, but I think then as writers and journalists, we have a responsibility to not be sort of patronising or exclusive or pretentious, all things I'm guilty of, and actually communicate that he's a bad un and that he's a good un. And I think that because actually ultimately those sort of stories are very valuable. Anyway, that was sort of it.
And Kasim, you're smiling there. I can see, it's about you guys explaining yourselves, isn't it? And letting people realise why you're different.
Yeah, partly that. And I think we do a good job with that already. I guess what we're asking for is a level playing field. And, if it's a small company in Cardiff versus a small company in Italy, to me, they're the same thing. I think what we're against is the concentration of wealth in a small number of hands. So across the board, not just our sector. So actually what we're saying is the same as many other sectors are saying, is let's have a fair level playing field, and we'll have a chance. And we've got confidence that, we can, pound for pound, we can beat the chains. This is not a question about us needing a helping hand up, but we want a level playing field to start off with, just to pick up on some of the conversations we've been having with Welsh Government. And I think often they'll say things like, oh, this is impossible, or this can't be achieved. And my gut response is, well, step aside, because impossible is just a man-made thought. And these are, unique times. And we always have these kind of issues. 2008 brought it to the fore, .com, 87, Brexit, these crashes, which we think are one-offs, and actually they're not. So what we're asking for is, let's root and branch. Let's look at the playing field. Let's decide what the future that we, red or blue. I think we could all write down on a piece of paper what we envisage a future to be. And we would write down pretty similar things. Now's the time to make it happen, I would say.
How do you make it happen?
So chains keeping money locally, stopping large corporations taking money out of local economies. Muhammad Ali said that quote, and I think I've got it here: "Impossible is just a big word thrown around by small men who find it easier to live in the world they've been given than to explore the power they have to change it." And I think that message needs to be put through. The problem with government is, you're effectively saying to somebody, let's knock this building down, and you're asking permission from people who are living in the penthouse of that building, and we need to change that. And it won't be given to us. If we were to redraw what our society is to look like, we all know what that means. More income, better education, better schools, and that ultimately boils down to how much money can the governments raise through taxation. And if they're unable to do that, it's glaringly obvious to me that they need to change the system on that front.
But Simon, you can't surely ask for government support and then actually criticise them at the same time, can you? That's not very fair.
Well, I mean, actually that is a big problem in Wales, which is there's a kind of unseen censorship in that way. I mean, I hope that we have, as WIRC, we have a very robust, open relationship with government. And, we know that we need them to make some changes, and we're asking them for things. But at the same time, it's beholden upon us to be truthful. We do have a situation in Wales sometimes that people are afraid to speak up to government because that they need government to resource them. That's not a good situation to be in. So, these things have to be said. Look, it's only about, Kasim's absolutely right. This is about imagination. We seem to have lost the imagination the ability to imagine a better future. I think all of us, as Cass said, we can imagine a better Wales in all respects, but particularly in terms of food and farming. And, if government can't imagine it, then we have to imagine it for them. People of Wales can imagine it. I've got total confidence in them.
You think so?
Oh yeah, definitely. It's not the people of Wales that are the problem. It's the fact they don't believe in government anymore. Because they don't deliver and they don't take them along for the journey. We need to say as a nation what it is, just like Cass said, in terms of food and farming, where would we like to be? And how, and then we decide not what are the barriers in the way, we decide how do we get there.
And Stephen, you buy quite a lot locally already and you try and do that. There's obviously some things that you can't buy locally. What would need to happen to make you continue to thrive, but also have more of an impact in terms of other businesses in Wales, other businesses in your area?
How do you mean an impact on other businesses? What was the people that I use?
Do we need more linking in with farming? Do we need help for other people to set up and grow, for instance? Yesterday in the food festival, we were talking about whether we should have more community growing. Would that kind of thing help restaurants to embed their money more in their local economy?
Yeah, absolutely. So we did that thing yesterday with the lobsters, and it was from port to plate, and I think if that was made people more aware of that it makes it more accessible and affordable, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because it's all about accessibility and affordability, because otherwise the cheaper option is the mass-produced sort of non-local option. It's like that time when I did that thing with James Martin when we were doing in the hospitals, and it came down to they were sourcing the lamb, and the lamb, the patients in the hospital were looking out the windows and could see the lamb, sort of grazing on the meadows, where they were eating lamb that was flown in from New Zealand, in the hospital, and it was like, but it couldn't be changed because of the purchasing through, et cetera, and it's like things like that need to change. I mean, you think how schools, and in Italy, Rachel, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the lamb that they serve in schools in Rachel in Italy is the Welsh, what I want to say with this, so that it's internationally protected, the PGI. The PGI, and that's served in Italian schools, and it's not, but I bet it's not in Welsh schools. How ridiculous is that? And well, that's what needs to change. And who decides that? Our friends down in Cardiff. So it's just, and look, I'm not knocking them. They've got hard jobs. It's like it's like anything. Anyone who's got to make big decisions, it's not easy. I know I'm not criticizing them because I wouldn't want their job for in China, but it's little things like that that are going to help. So if Italy can do it, so Welsh in Italy, in Italian schools they use PGI Welsh lamb. Why can't we do it on our own doorstep? I don't know. So it's things like that. I mean, look, we do as best we can, and it's encouraging other people, but it's also changing people's habits, isn't it? It's about it's not about making us rich and wealthy, because we don't do it to get rich, because you just don't get rich from doing this. I mean, it's a vocation because we enjoy doing it, and it's a lifestyle. But the bean counters up in the Golden Arches, they're the ones getting rich. Do you mean like that? So it's informing our local customers, the local, just the locals about what we're about, as opposed to giving them the option. Not saying don't go there. Say, well, have a look at what we do. Or they're like, it's you pay your money, makes your choice, isn't it?
So Rachel, as we draw this to a close, can you believe we've been talking for over an hour? It comes to you to try and tell us how we can learn from Italy, and how you do have things like Welsh PGA lamb in Italian schools, where there's just as much deprivation and riches, the extremes that we have in our economy. You have that in Italy too. So how can we learn from you?
God, I don't know that, but then they do have, they have Welsh lamb, but they can't get local olive oil. It's complicated. I mean, it's, my son's school, I'm writing, I've been wanting to write something about it for 2 years, but I mean, yes, generally I mean, my son sits down to work, well, he doesn't at the moment, but, sits down to a sort of, 3-quarter meal every lunchtime. I mean, the schools are, I mean, things are sort of generally better, but it's it's ongoing, isn't it? It's all like, we have to keep working all the time. Like, everything's always changing, and so it should, and we've sort of got to keep up with that. I think there is, I mean, I think education does start young here. I mean, again, I don't want to idealise Italy. I've been here 16 years. There's lots of problems, but they do. I mean, kids at school, they write about the wine harvest and the olive oil harvest, and when chestnuts are falling off the trees, and it's have a local market. So food is is very seasonal in schools. So if a lot of things boil down to education, well, I think kids are off to a good start here. I mean, there's a price for having a very traditional way of eating, because it means that things then get complicated and lots of things are ignored. But I think sort of defined way of eating gives children a good sort of grounding in a sense. And so I think it does boil down to education, and I think that, yeah, and in that sense it needs to be evolving all the time. And we need to be, I think, as a writer, as I say, I'm very aware of sort of thinking about this at the moment, like how I can be helpful in telling sort of helpful stories, rather than the sort of, I don't know, pretentious or useless ones, which people I should be talking about. And that feels important at the moment. I'll write the piece about Italian school meals with Welsh lamb.
Yeah, and make sure you get quotes in from Stephen and everyone else as well. And
yeah, absolutely.
Festival. So there, it all comes down to education, as is so often the case, and working together. And who knows what is ahead of any of us in the next few months. But Kasim, Rachel, Simon and Stephen, thank you ever so much for your time. And thank you for joining us, because this is really important, and we were so keen to keep Abergavenny Festival going on this year, even though we couldn't meet in person. And the good news is you can listen to all this again and watch it lots of times, send the link to your friends, because very soon this will be on YouTube, so you'll be able to watch it there. And one of the things I really wanted to say is that this hour has been about ideas. We've only got through about 10% of what I'd hoped for us to talk to, and we've all, I'm sure, got lots more to say. I must say, I don't think I've ever been part of a debate where someone's quoted Muhammad Ali. I'm going to have to remember that one. And, we want your ideas to keep coming. The festival isn't just here when we all get together virtually or physically in Abergavenny. The festival, Abergavenny Food Festival, is here for all of you, wherever you live, all year round. And the easiest way to keep that presence with us, that contact with us, is through Twitter. So keep these ideas coming on our Twitter feed. As you think later on today or tomorrow or next week about something that someone said, or you'd like to contribute, whoever you are, please go to the Twitter feed and the conversation will continue there. And, let's hope that we can stay healthy and we'll be together another time next year, hopefully. And I will have to add one other thing. You might not know, but Abergavenny Food Festival is not a profit-making organisation. It's a not-for-profit organisation, and an awful lot of work is also done voluntarily. You can imagine it's been a bit tricky the last few months and years, as it has been for many organisations. So if you can, why not Google our crowdfunding site and donate so that we can hopefully be here and continue the conversation next year. Thank you all very much. Take care. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Cheers.